Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Foundations in Actions, Creating Safe, Compassionate Spaces. My name is Susanna Lutuli, and I am very happy to be your moderator today. This webinar is part of the Caring 2.0 initiative, which brings together partners across the region to strengthen trauma-informed, compassionate and safe environments for children and those who support them. Before we begin, we will have a look at some housekeeping rules. And before that, just to let you know that this session lasts about 90 minutes. And what we will do, we will explore how trauma-informed care can be put into daily practice, not just as a concept, but as a way of interacting and creating safety and trust in our relationships and systems. I think we are waiting for some more participants to join. There has been a large number, and the system is taking longer for everyone to come in. So I'm just going to take one more minute before we start. Okay, so before we go on, we do have a translation service which can be accessed via Zoom. If you go at the bottom and you click on the More Global sign, you will see translation, from which point you can access your language. If anyone is having any difficulties, just put it in the chat. Otherwise, the translation can be accessed from there. Before we go on, we'd like to invite into our event Maria Vuksani from Terre, Kosovo, so she can share a few words about the Caring 2.0 initiative and its purpose. And then we can go on with our speakers. But for now, Maria, if you'd like to give us an introduction of the Caring 2.0 project, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Greetings and welcome to everyone to this first webinar in the series of 3 within the Caring 2 project funded by European Union. Just a couple of words regarding the project, the supporting trauma-informed care approach and these webinars. It's a multidisciplinary prevention and response to school-related violence, which is, as we know, across Europe does remain is a significant concern, impacting children across all member states with varying severity and forms. Evidence from multiple sources suggests that various forms of violence are present in and around schools. While it should be acknowledged that in each national context, legislative, policy, and practice advancement have been made towards preventing and responding to violence against children, these measures need to be scaled up to support operationalizations of integrated child protection systems with the best interest of the child at their center. Hence, building on successful implementation of REVIS and Caring transnational projects, current Caring 2 project, which is multidisciplinary prevention of and response to school-related violence, aims to contribute to strengthening and functionality of integrated child protection systems through multidisciplinary prevention and response to school-related violence, including its gendered dimensions and rights-based participations of children, especially those in vulnerable situations. Implementing countries of these projects are Bulgaria, with partner organizations SAPI and Association Roditelji, Croatia, with the partner organizations Brave Phone or Hrabri Telefon, Greece, TDH, Terre, Hungary, Terre as a coordination role, Kosovo, Terre, and in Romania, also Terre. The overall objective of the project is to enhance the functionality of integrated child protection systems through multidisciplinary prevention and response to school-related violence. To achieve these objectives, the project is conceptualized through a social ecological lens that places an emphasis on different layers, including individual, family, peers, community, society, and the ways that each layer is affected by and affects the others. To holistically address violence against children, concerted efforts at different layers of children's social ecologies are implemented through a range of mutually reinforced methodologies to provide basis for disseminating best practices. These methodologies are caring curricula, gender-based violence prevention by addressing the existing social and gender norms, accompanied with 2 companion tools to caring curricula, which is children participation in child-led initiatives, stronger voices, safer schools, heard, valued, and driving change. Companion tool 2, not in my class, not in my chat, which is related to bullying, cyberbullying, and bystander attitude. I support my friend for child-to-child support, trauma-informed care training package for multidisciplinary teams, and on personalization of interagency referral mechanisms at school level. We also have a component of regional child and advisory board and 5 national child and advisory boards, which are supported and developed as a tested mechanism to ensure meaningful participation of children in decision-making process that affects their lives. As far as trauma-informed training package for multidisciplinary teams, designed and by the author Susanna Lutoli, aims to equip professionals, including teachers, law enforcement, school staff, support services, and health and social professionals, with the skills to apply trauma-informed approach or trauma-sensitive support in interventions when working with children who have experienced and are affected by violence. Based on this developed training package, a 3-day transnational training of trainers were organized in Pristina, Kosovo, for participants from 5 implementing countries to equip with the competencies needed to provide trauma-sensitive support and interventions to children affected by violence. This is the first webinar of the series of 3 webinars organized on trauma-informed care approach related topics, and is to provide a peer-to-peer learning experience. Thank you very much. Susanna, back to you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for setting the scene and for reminding us all why this work is so important. It was a joy and immense pleasure to have this training with all the 8 representatives from 8 countries and a great initiative for Terre. We'll now move to our first topic, which is why trauma-informed care matters and SAMSHA's 6 principles of trauma-informed care. Our speaker for this session is Ralitsa Mihaylova, clinical psychologist. She will guide us through the foundation ideas of trauma-informed care, including the SAMSHA's principle and the 4 R's of trauma. I welcome Ralitsa. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Susanna, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. I'm very honored and happy to be leading the first part of this very important webinar, which will focus, as Susanna said, on what trauma is and which are the basic principles guiding our understanding of trauma-informed care. The next slide, please. I would like to begin with this quote by Gabor Mate, which I'm sure some of you know. He says that trauma is not what happens happens to you. It is what happens inside you as a result of what happens to you. Nowadays, there is a tendency to think about trauma as an event or series of events that happened to us or to someone else back in the past, and that we can't do much about it. But actually, trauma has more to do with our own experience and understanding of what happened than the actual events. The response to the traumatic events is almost always long-lasting and negative, and impacts the attitudes, behaviors, and other aspects of functioning of every person, and it shapes how people see themselves, others, and the world around them. And while this is all true, it is also true that there is a lot that we can do about trauma survivors. And the next slide, please. First, we will look closely at the definitions of trauma and trauma-informed care presented by the World Health Organization and the U.S. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administrations, SAMSHA. Shortly, they provide widely used frameworks that define trauma and guide trauma-informed care across many systems. And as you can see, the World Health Organization defines trauma and underlines its long-lasting impact and the nature of the stressful events or situations which cause pervasive stress. And SAMHSA is more commonly known as the 3 E's because it emphasizes events, experience, and effects. In essence, they both describe trauma as a complex interplay between the event, the individual's experience, and the enduring effects that trauma has, and thus they emphasize the importance of understanding trauma through holistic, person-centered lens. And because trauma affects every aspect of person's life and interactions, trauma-informed care offers a very structured approach for creating safety, trust, and empowerment across all levels of services. Both definitions emphasize that trauma-informed care is not a specific program or technique that we use once, for example, but an approach that integrates awareness of trauma into every aspect of practice and policy. And most importantly, it actually facilitates healing by actively involving individuals in their own care process and empowers them. But before we talk about why trauma-informed care is so important, we have to pause and look more closely at what makes trauma so powerful. And that's on the next slide. Thank you. As you can see, unfortunately, trauma touches nearly every community and population, and most people actually will experience at least one traumatic event in their lifetime. And because trauma is so common, it's a public health concern, and its effects are seen in healthcare, in education, in justice, in the workplace, and in all kinds of systems. By now, you may think that if trauma is so widespread, it's very easy to recognize who suffered from trauma, but that's actually not true because trauma and its effects are often hidden, and the signs can manifest as something else. We call them sometimes coping mechanisms, for example, withdrawal, substance abuse, anxiety, perfectionism, and many more. Many attitudes and behaviors, as well as illnesses, actually, that we observe every day can stem from early traumatic experiences. And speaking of coping mechanisms, the body remembers what the mind tries to forget almost all the time, and trauma lives in the body as much as in the mind. It can influence our heart rate, our breathing, our muscle tension, and immune function, and it can surface as chronic pain, fatigue, or illness. Sometimes people present these symptoms in the doctor's cabinet, and after different medical exams, they turn out to be completely healthy, but the pain and the symptoms are very real for them. And that's when us psychologists, we know that there is something deeper happening or happened that had happened to this person, and there is a story behind these symptoms that needs to be told in words so that the body doesn't take on this role, because it, as I said, it often remembers what the mind tries to forget, which is why actually trauma-informed care includes physical safety as well as emotional. Moreover, every trauma story exists within a larger social and cultural context. Every trauma has its own story. Many people can go through the same event, for example, war or natural disasters or domestic violence, for example, but the risk is not the same for everybody. It depends on the individual characteristics, the support system that was available at the moment, the surrounding circumstances, and many, many more, as well as the social cultural factors. Okay, so if trauma is so common and this complex, the real question becomes, how do we make sure our care and actions, and even when they are well intended, don't add to the harm? And that's where trauma-informed care really matters. The next slide, please. Thank you. Being a public health and relational issue, trauma needs to be addressed with caution and attention. And it's not enough to have separate programs and protocols on how to deal with trauma. We need to have an ongoing commitment to curiosity, reflection, and compassion. Trauma-informed care encompasses all of that, but it's also a culture that shapes our interaction, policies, and even our spaces that we create. It's also about understanding, and through that, about avoiding re-traumatization, which we'll talk about later. And last but not least, it's actually everybody's responsibility, from individuals, organizations, public institutions, even the business. We can all contribute to this climate of trauma-informed care. Okay, the next slide, please. Now, I will present to you SAMSHA's 6 principles of trauma-informed care, which you see on the slide. They are created to guarantee a common understanding of what trauma-informed care is. Every individual and every organization, as well as institutions, must continuously assess and improve based on these 6 principles: safety, trust and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment, voice and choice, as well as cultural, historical, and gender issues. They are more about how trauma-informed care feels and the values and qualities that should be present in a trauma-informed environment. Okay, on the next slide. Yes, we have their definitions as well as examples. People perform at their best and feel at their best first when they feel safe, emotionally and physically. There's also different types of safety: physical, psychological, emotional, social, moral. On every level, we must provide safety in order for people who suffer trauma to feel calm and protected and to avoid further traumatization. Next, we have trust and transparency. Trustworthiness means maintaining respectful and professional boundaries, which sometimes can be a problem for people who suffer trauma. They may be too allowing with their boundaries and thus feel exploited, or too distant. But when we have trust and transparency, we ensure interactions and rules are consistent, and safe for trauma survivors, and the goal must be to build and maintain trust with service recipients, staff, stakeholders, everybody who is involved. Peer support relates to the climate that an organization creates and for opportunity for deeper mutual connections between and among all staff who is trauma informed. This can happen through informal peer support, something very simple such as grabbing coffee or having breakfast together or lunch, and sharing professional experiences and learning from each other. Collaboration and mutuality, they relate to creating an environment of doing with someone rather than doing it to or for someone. Collaborative interactions and protocols create space for people to explore circumstances and options from their own perspective. Empowerment, voice, and choice. We think of empowerment as coming from the person's own inner wisdom and strength rather than power given to them from an outside expert. And sometimes we have prejudice or beliefs about people who are trauma survivors, that they are very fragile or incompetent, and they can cope with different tasks and they can perform because of what happened to them back in the past. And actually that is not true. They have their own strength and abilities which they may not recognize, but that's our part of helping them do so, and to see these strengths and abilities in someone which they cannot see for themselves, and empower them to do their own actions and strengths. And lastly, taking into account culture, history, as well as gender, enable individuals and organizations to respond respectfully and effectively to people of all backgrounds in a manner that recognizes, affirms, and values their worth. It involves critical self-reflection, lifelong learning and growth, and commitment to recognizing and sharing power. And on the last slide, these are the 4 R's of trauma-informed care, which describe the core elements of trauma-informed approach, how it looks in action. They outline the process of becoming and being trauma-informed. The process begins with realizing the widespread impact of trauma, which we're doing today, and its characteristics. That's when we begin to recognize signs or symptoms of trauma in everyone that we live, work, or communicate with, and only then we can respond effectively by using different policies and practices at the workplace and in the way we live and contribute to our communities. And lastly, when we have all that, we can avoid re-traumatization. That's the end of my part, and I would like just to add that, as I said, trauma-informed care is not about different protocols or techniques. It's about the way we are, a way of being, a way of living, and how we relate to others in every aspect of our life. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ralitsa. That was beautifully explained. And thank you for the insightful presentation and for grounding us in the why behind trauma-informed practice, understanding trauma both as a public health and a relational issue. For our next topic, we will be talking about what emotional and physical safety look like and co-regulation. For this session, will be led by Francesca Nicora from Terre, Romania. Francesca will explore what safety really means, not just the absence of harm, but the presence of trust, and how our calm and emotional regulation can help create safe spaces for others. Francesca, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you, Susanna. Welcome, everyone. In this session, as mentioned by Susanna, we are going to explore what safety means through 3 different lenses. So we go on to the next slide. All right, let's start with emotions. So emotions are messengers and not problems to fix. That means that they tell us something about ourselves, and we should not categorize as issues to be solved. So emotions, as previously said by Ralitsa, they are embodied. So we feel them first in our body and before the brain names them. Therefore, to understand trauma, we must understand our emotions, because trauma really speaks through feelings. Hence, when we feel safe to talk about our emotions, we are allowed to feel rather than merely functioning. So I invite you to check in the next slide the feelings wheel. And here is just a zoom in, because I would like you to check the different emotions. This is a really interesting tool to be used in your practices, because as you can see, it details all the different feelings and not just merely our feelings that we normally say, that I feel bad, surprised, happy, sad, disgusted, or angry, or fearful. It goes deeper into different nuances of feelings. So the feeling wheel is a trauma-informed tool that teaches people, especially children, about emotional literacy. This means that they learn how to detail their emotions, and is guided by the SAMSHA principles, the 6 ones that you previously heard, because it fosters safety, trust, empowerment, cultural sensitivity, collaboration, and peer support by providing a structured, shared way to explore feelings. In practice, this feeling wheel makes emotions visible, nameable, and manageable, and helping especially not just adults but children safely express what they feel. It can be used in your practice, for example, for emotional check-ins. So for example, before starting your activity, you can ask your client or the children you support, how do you feel today? And thus inviting them to zoom in into their emotions. You can also, after identifying the emotions, you can invite them to see what helps them regulate that emotion. For example, if the child or the adult is going to ask you, is going to tell you that they feel stressed, you can ask them, okay, you feel stressed. What would help you to feel less stressed? And these are just examples on how you can use this wheel, and I invite you to explore further. There are a wealth of, especially in the website, you can find different ways to use it. And over time, this tool supports self-regulation and builds a stronger sense of internal safety and understanding. We can move to the next slide. So to heal from trauma, children and young people need to feel safe. And emotional safety means much more than the absence of harm. It is connected to the presence of trust, empathy, and acceptance, especially from the adult, the one that keeps them safe. Children feel free to express emotions without the fear of being judged or punished. This allows children to regulate their emotions, build stronger relationships, and allows room for healing. As a practice prompt, during your work, in order to understand whether you are being a safe adult, you can ask yourself the following questions. Do they feel emotionally safe around me? How do I respond when they are dysregulated? And finally, how do I model calm, empathy, and boundaries? These are some really good practice questions to see if you are creating a safe environment. In general, a safe adult is someone who makes others feel safe without needing to say it. Moving into the next slide. As you know now, emotions are first felt in the body, and when somebody doesn't feel safe and it's facing a situation that maybe is perceived as danger, of course, they will have physical symptoms. They will have an accelerated heartbeat, difficulties in breathing, the muscles feel tense, the vision might be blurred, and of course, rational thinking shuts down and they feel big emotions. They can feel fear, rage, and panic. And this is a phenomenon called amygdala hijack because our emotions are hijacked, they are compromised. And most likely, the people that feel this situation are gonna have trauma responses. They can fear fight, flight, freeze, and fawn as a mode of reaction that activate without even thinking about it. Irrationally, these activate. So, of course, logic and reasoning in this situation become offline. So now moving into the next slide. To avoid these trauma responses in difficult situations, we need to learn how to regulate our emotions. But what does emotional regulation mean? So emotional regulation is when we recognize, understand, and manage our emotions in a way that helps us respond rather than react to them, as we previously see. It's how we move from I feel overwhelmed to I can handle this. I can manage this situation. The emotion is just a feeling that is telling me something more that I need to address. Next slide. So we talked about emotional regulation. And when we talk about co-regulation, is how other people I interact with can help me feel safe enough to regulate. Children in general, but as well as adults, need connections when they are dysregulated. So co-regulation happens in safe relationships. Others help us feel steady, grounded. So if we as practitioners that deal with adults and children that might have traumas, we need to provide them with a sense of calm to support them. And this sense of calm can be contagious, as relational safety begins with our presence. So when we use a soft tone, when we speak to people, we keep the eye contact, we keep a regular breathing and body posture, we can help them co-regulate. And this grounding presence has much bigger impact into their relaxation than actually words. But be mindful, because it's important to remember that as caregivers, we need to regulate ourselves before we help others. Next slide. And now let's see a bit the different dynamics of co-regulation between the adult and the child, and why it is important that the adult is regulated. So let's start with when we have a regulated adult and a regulated child, we will likely have a regulated child. And then when we have a regulated adult and a dysregulated child, we're likely gonna have a regulated child. Instead, when the adult is dysregulated and the child is dysregulated, we will also have a dysregulated child. Whereas when the adult is dysregulated and the child is regulated, the child is likely gonna be dysregulated. So now you can see the importance of being regulated first as an adult so that you can help the child regulate their emotions. So now in the next slide, of course, we can see that it's not easy to regulate our emotions, especially if we interact with other people, but we can use some tools that can help us regulate our emotions so that we can help others. And we can use similar tools to help the people we support. So we already spoke about naming the emotion through the feeling wheel. You can use it as a tool. You can really get creative about it. You can use it also in art practices. After you identify the emotion, you can ask the child or the adult to draw them on a piece of paper, etc. You can take a break when you feel dysregulated or invite the person you interact with to take a pause. You can do some breathing exercises. You can take a walk or move. You can talk to someone that you trust or a specialist. You can meditate or practice mindfulness. There are a vast array of things that you can do to regulate. One that I like the most and that I learned recently is a grounding exercise. So you can either do it by yourself or when you want to help somebody to go back into presence and go back into this world instead of the world of feelings and the mind. You can ask them to think about 5 things they can see, 4 things they can touch, 3 things they can hear, 2 things they can smell, and 1 thing they can taste, and simply have a conversation about their feelings. They can have some time to look around the space and find objects, colors, look at the shapes. They can feel some textures, they can listen to sounds, they can focus on pleasant or neutral scents, or they can taste something, so that this sensory check-in helps them calm their nervous system and shift focus from distressing thoughts or feelings to the physical world, as we said. So remember that regulation is really the foundation of healing. And really, we should first regulate and feel safe before we can think or learn. And now moving on to the next slide to conclude this session. So next slide. Remember that creating emotional, psychological, and physical safety forms the foundation of trauma-informed care. Together, these layers really create a safe environment and help the people we work with to heal and grow, but also to heal ourselves as well. And I want to leave you with this reflection prompt. And since we said that emotional regulation starts with us, really take 5 minutes today and think about what helps you feel emotionally safe when you're upset, overwhelmed, or vulnerable. And thank you very much for the participation. See you at the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Francesca. That was a beautiful presentation and a beautiful reminder that calm is contagious and the safety begins with our presence, in our tone, in our body language, and in our attention. Just in the same way that stress is contagious, so is calm. So before we help anyone and before we have a conversation with anyone going through a difficult situation, it needs to start with us. We need to look into ourselves. Are we calm? Are we present in this moment? So thank you very much. That was a beautiful presentation. For our next topic, and before we go there, any content-related, subject-related questions, please put them in the Q&A section. We will answer all of these at the end of the presentations. Thank you very much. Now, for the next topic, we have avoiding re-traumatization and what micro actions can we take that build trust and safety. And this will be presented by Anastasiia Doroshenko, who's Regional Child Protection Advisor for Europe of Terre. She will highlight how trauma-informed care is not just about what we do, but also what we avoid doing very often, and how small daily actions can build or break trust. Anastasia, thank you for being with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Susanna. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for joining. Indeed, in this final segment, technical segment of the webinar, we will look at re-traumatization. Re-traumatization that might take place through systems, through policies, through interactions that echo past harm. Oftentimes, people are re-traumatized not because of a specific massive event, but through repeated experiences with organizations or people that echo earlier harm. This includes things like our tone of voice, our language, control, unpredictability, not feeling heard, being ignored, or being in an environment that simply feels unsafe. Consequently, we all need to reflect on what are some of the things in our systems, in our organizations, in our behaviors that might unintentionally repeat patterns of harm. Please, let's continue to the next slide. Thank you. Re-traumatization happens when a current experience triggers some intense, overwhelming re-experiencing of a past trauma. It makes the person to live again the stress reactions as if the original events were happening again. It happens when our actions echo past harm, echo some powerlessness that was experienced in the past. It might even be unintentional, yet still cause emotional pain. Again, it is important to emphasize that these are not some extreme events. These are often subtle interactions, policies we have in place, environmental factors that mirror old wounds. Here on the slide, we see some of the examples of what it can look like in everyday practice. We have power imbalances due to children's status in the society. So we know examples when adults are applying rigid discipline, when engaging with children, not listening to children's voices, ignoring them. We also have sudden transitions that can trigger a sense of unpredictability in children. For instance, when children are told to either start or stop doing certain activities immediately right away, or when we are pulling them away from activities without any warning, or another example, when we deviate from a planned activity that we initially anticipated without any prior explanation. The tone of our voice, a harsh, judgmental language can have a strong impact on children. Forced physical contact, forced touch, being in a close physical proximity to the child. Ignoring sensory needs of children when they are either hypersensitive, so overly sensitive to sensory inputs, or they are hyposensitive, undersensitive to sensory inputs. For instance, some children might need to be in the space that is more quiet, with less noise. Some children would need for the lights to be brighter. Others would feel more comfortable with the dimmer lights. It also happens that practitioners resort to exclusionary practices, to punitive measures. For instance, removing a child from the space if their behavior is perceived to be problematic or challenging, instead of finding some of the ways to support their regulations. These situations can all echo earlier experience of trauma, whether someone realizes it or not. Please, let's go next. Now, why it is important? So, cues of threat are some of the signals that trigger a defensive response. On the other hand, cues of safety, they activate social engagements and create feelings of calm, feelings of trust. Our nervous system constantly analyzes these environmental cues to determine whether to engage in social connections or to activate the protective response. For example, tone of voice can be either harsh, aggressive, monotone, or it can be warm. It can be friendly. The importance of having a choice for children cannot be underestimated. When children are seen but not heard, or we offer them several choices and support them to make an informed decision, informed choice. We can be rushed, we can be dismissive, or we can be present and pay attention to their needs, to their interests. We can be inconsistent and unpredictable in what we say, in how we react, what we do, or we can be consistent and reliable. The importance of our body language should not be underplayed either. Judgmental posture, defensive posture, leaning over the child, or on the other hand, having our posture open, relaxed gestures, and a friendly approach. Please, let's go next. All right, so now let's look at some of the alternatives we have. How can we shift from judgment to curiosity in how we speak, how we respond, how we act? What is key here is to focus on regulation and connection, not control, no discipline. It is these small shifts that can make a huge difference in making someone feel safe and supported. So for instance, instead of saying, why are you acting this way? Let's pause for a moment and think, I'm wondering what support the child might need. Instead of saying, calm down, let's try, I see you are upset. Take your time, I'm here with you. Instead of saying, you are being really difficult, let's try, something might feel really big for you right now. Rather than punishing emotional outbursts in children, let's support them to regulate first, then talk about their behavior. The importance of moving away from zero tolerance or punitive approaches and offering flexible relational responses instead. Or another example, rather than threatening the child to gain their compliance, let's work together to build solutions. Let's continue. As mentioned before, these are small actions within daily practice that have a big impact. These are small actions that can either build trust or break trust. And that is what we do daily, that shapes a sense of safety in children. Simple daily practices, knowing children's names, calling them by their names. Offering small choices. It can be as small as, do you prefer to have a blue pen or another color? Keeping promises we made to children. So for instance, you know, I don't have an answer to your question. Please let me find it out. I promise next time we see each other, we will come back to this discussion. And next time we see each other and we come back to this discussion. Validating children's feelings. It looks like you are feeling really sad about that, or I hear you. That sounds really disappointing. Asking before making assumptions. You seem upset. Can you tell me what is worrying you right now? Listening with presence. Listening with our eyes, listening with our ears, listening with our open body posture, being at the same eye level with the child. When seen through this lens, every interaction is an opportunity to reduce harm and increase connection. Please, let's continue. All right. We have just looked at what every individual can do within their daily practice. Even one action by one practitioner can make a difference. At the same time, every practitioner works within their organization, and this will have an impact on the way they interact with children. As mentioned by Ralitsa, trauma-informed approach, it's a cultural shift. It is not a checklist. And what we aim for is this cultural shift across different parts, across different elements of the system, to strive for a trauma-informed organization. Now, what does this shift look like? So we begin with reviewing policies and practices. Our forms, our rules, our procedures, trauma sensitive. Do they leave space for flexibility, for reflection? There is also a physical space. Consider lighting, noise, signage. Are there calming spaces for children? Are there calming spaces for adults who support children? Training and supervision, they should be ongoing, not just one-off events. Staff need regular support, space to reflect, have access to supportive, reflective supervision. Then inclusive leadership. Inclusive leadership matters. Leaders who role model vulnerability, openness, and curiosity. Feedback loops need to be real, need to be functional, respected. And finally, empowerment. Empowerment should be prioritized over compliance. This means involving and meaningfully involving service users in shaping services and always offering a choice, offering transparency. You said, we did. When it comes to the concept of trauma-informed organization, there are many interesting and important aspects to unpack. And this will be one of the main topics of the next two webinars. And with that, I would like to use this opportunity to warmly invite you to join them in the upcoming month. And for the moment, I thank you very much for joining and for listening to the presentation. Thank you. Susanna, back to you.
Thank you very much, Anastasia. That was a wonderful presentation and very powerful indeed. You've shown us how even small shifts in language and tone, and the famous quote with, instead of saying what's wrong with you, we say what happened to you, can completely change how a person feels and how they're seen and supported. So thank you very much. So, in moving forward, we heard all our three of our presenters talking about different subjects. Now we are opening the floor for questions and answers. I've got quite a few questions in the chat, which I will aim to answer to the best of my ability. So if you just give me a minute to review them all, there are quite a few. And I'm sure if we have any more questions, just put them in the poll and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability. The questions I've answered are in order. So I will start from the first one. So the first question about was the trauma and children in street situations. What services do they need and how long does the recovery take? With children on street, we have multiple sources of trauma and we have multiple trauma. So we see it's what we call complex trauma. This will slightly be discussed on the second webinar when we talk about awareness and how we help children. The way that it affects children, it's fear, anxiety, and hypervigilance. Cognitively, it affects their concentration, learning problems. Behaviorally, it's aggression, withdrawal, physical, sleep, and health issues. And relationally, difficulty trusting others. They do need safe spaces, safe adults, mental health support, basic needs, education support, and coordinated child protection services. The recovery has no fixed timeline. Safety may stabilize in weeks or months, Emotional recovery may take months or years, because complex trauma healing can take longer, much longer, but improves with consistent support. And consistency in safety is the key to that. I'll move to the second question. It says, children who have experienced trauma, what progressive mental health pathologies they can develop? Trauma can lead to complex PTSD, and as we said there, it can lead to anxiety, depression, attachment disorder, behavior problems, dissociation, substance abuse, and somatic symptoms. We see people in adulthood struggling with headaches, stomach issues, sleep problems. It's one thing to remember, and it is very important, that not all adverse experiences do develop into full-blown traumas. There are buffering factors at the time when experiences are happening that will buffer the trauma experience and will change the trajectory and the outcome. It is really important to notice these. Without support, with support, these experiences can get better and not develop into full-blown trauma. Without support, they can intensify over time. So it's a multiple approach, and support at the time when it's happening, relationships, safe adults around, so the child can make sense of their experiences and feel safe at the time. The third question is, what's the difference between emotions and feelings? The difference between emotions and feelings is emotions live in our body, feelings live in our mind. When we feel something, it's in our body. It's the way our body reacts when we're experiencing emotions. When we're feeling something, it's how we interpret that emotion. An example of this could be, if you hear a loud noise, your heart jumps, your muscles tense. That's an emotion, and it's in the body. The instant reaction is the emotion itself, which is fear. A few seconds later, you may think, that scared me, I'm feeling unsafe. That is the feeling. Your mind is making meaning of that emotion. Another example, a positive one, could be a friend gives you a warm compliment, your face softens, chest feels warm. That is the body reaction, the emotion itself, which is joy. But then you think, that made me feel appreciated and valued. That interpretation of the emotion is the feeling. So emotions live in the body, the feelings is the meaning that we give to these emotions and how we interpreted them cognitively in our mind. The other question, now there are, just before we go on, there are so many questions. Like we've got 11, so you've got to bear with me. We've got to take our time a bit slowly. So the next question was about a 5-year-old who experienced trauma but can't express fully until they're older. Should we encourage them to reflect on what happened or focus on how they've grown? If we're talking about the child at that age, the priority is safety, stability, and emotional regulation, not asking them to recall or to analyze, reflect on their trauma. We don't encourage children to reflect on what happened because this can overwhelm them, re-traumatize them. Instead of doing that, we focus on helping them feel safe in the present. And we heard how we do that by being safe, by providing that consistency, by not being judgmental, by allowing space and time, supporting their emotions and behavior, building trust, routines, and connection, and giving them language for feelings, emotional literacy, not for the traumatic event itself. Once they're older, and only if they want to bring it up, they can make more meaning of their experiences. These can be explored in reflective therapeutic settings. Healing starts with safety, not with revisiting the event. The other question is how best trauma-informed care can be used, especially for parents of children who are victims of technology, assisted child sexual exploitation and abuse, to help them be compassionate and create safe spaces rather than blame the child. This is really, really an important question because trauma-informed care can help parents shift from blame to safety and compassion. There's no benefits for anyone in blaming children. And firstly, they are not to blame for what happens to them. So we need to avoid shaming, guilting, or putting children in a situation where they feel they had anything to do with what happened to them. Trauma-informed care focuses in helping parents understand their children's behavior and how is that shaped by manipulation, coercion, fear, and trauma, not by choice. So they didn't choose what happened to them. Key support elements in this include psychoeducation for parents, helping them understand how trauma works and how it manifests in children's behavior, compassion-focused responses, empathy, safety planning, regulation. We talked about regulation earlier, and we need to be regulated to help others regulate, and supportive language, not why did you do this? Instead, we're saying of why did you do this? We say, you're safe, I'm here with you, this is not your fault. This approach rebuilds trust, reduces shame, and creates the safe environment that the child needs to heal. The other question. If clients can't avoid the source of trauma, living with a violent parent, and there are no safe houses, how can we help them feel safe? It's a tricky one because we should have systems, but this happens that there are times when it's impossible. What we do in these instances, when safety can't be changed immediately, we create small pockets of emotional and internal safety, even in unsafe environments. Key support could include predictability and routine, small daily structures that give the child a sense of control, emotional regulation skills, breathing, grounding, safe body practices that calm the nervous system, and safe relationships. One stable, trusted adult, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a relative, whether it's a social worker or a mentor, can buffer the impact of the trauma that is being experienced by the child. Meaningful boundaries. It's also important. While we support and offer these safety for children, it's also important to have boundaries, teaching the child that it's not their fault and that they are allowed to feel and express. Safety planning as well. Identify safe rooms, safe people, and steps to take during violent episodes. And we need to focus on their strengths, helping the child recognize their coping strategies and resilience by pointing it out to them, by providing the verbal words and the language for their strengths. Even when the environments cannot change immediately, emotional safety, co-regulation, and one supportive care adult can significantly reduce harm and protect the child's well-being. I'm going to just take a second before we move on to the next question. Is there anyone else? Because I'm reaching to end of the two more questions, but there's also questions in the chat that I haven't addressed, and they start. So if any of the facilitators want to have a look at those questions and have a go at answering them, please just let me know, put it in the chat, and we will take turns in doing that. So the next question, we're talking about limited communication. How can we understand their needs and experiences if there is no child cannot communicate verbally and there's no cooperation from parents? It's quite similar to the previous one, providing when children cannot verbalize their trauma, we need to start focusing on verbal, emotional, body language cues that they give us, not the child's ability to explain. Indicators such as changes in sleep, changes in patterns, changes in play, their mood, aggression, withdrawal, fear, or sudden clinginess indicate something is going for them. As professionals, we can still do our best to understand the child through observation, through safe, consistent interaction, play-based or trauma-informed assessments, and noticing patterns across settings. Are they behaving the same at school, in the center, or with their peers? Full cooperation from parents helps, but it is not required to identify a child's distress. Children speak through their behavior, and that is often the clearest window we have into their trauma. Okay, we're looking also at our timing. We have another 15 minutes for the answers. There is one question in a family child protection unit in Sudan and challenges faced in providing trauma-informed care because children sometimes might identify the perpetrator. This can be very triggering. How can we process and be trauma-informed? This is quite a niche and professional question, which is specific to a system. What we heard from our presenters today stands true in every context. And for this, it's very important to refer to the guidance by many resources. So you can find resources on, I do have some which I can put in the chat later, or I have a collection of resources which can send to people in an email if they have specific questions. But preparing the child gently, explaining what will happen beforehand, what will that include? Because sometimes we cannot prevent from putting the child in the situation to testify. That might be the only source and the only evidence in addressing the crime or the perpetrator. But it's really important to have a trained, calm, and supportive officer or social worker present who is trauma informed, creating safe physical environments, avoiding direct confrontation, allowing breaks, giving choice, and co-regulation, and the process support afterward. Even when the procedures cannot change, how we speak, the environment that we create, and the control we give to the child can make the process far less traumatic than it might be otherwise. Okay. There's a question how to react when a child does not speak and withdraws into himself as a result of domestic violence. The child is age 10. We spoke earlier. It's a very similar answer. We don't ask them to reflect. We provide safety. The answer will be the same, which is for a 5 or 6-year-old who has, I'm just going through the answers because it's the same one.
Susanna,
Yes.
there's a question that I would like to answer if
Yes,
it's
please.
okay, about the self-care of the caregiver. For example, teacher, psychologist, counselor, parent working with a traumatized person or children. And I would like to mention the vicarious trauma, which is the emotional toll on people working closely with trauma survivors. This is a very important question, and I think both Francesca and Anastasia mentioned some ways to cope with difficult emotions when experiencing something difficult, but as well as when we work with trauma survivors. I think also supervision with someone more experienced in the field that we are working with is very important, as well as interventions or the peer support that I mentioned in the SAMSHA's 6 principles is also very true about self-care. Sometimes practicing our hobbies and doing something fun and nice with the people we love, it's not enough to compensate this emotional toll that this very hard work puts on us. So supervision, intervention, and sometimes even our own personal psychotherapy could also be very beneficial.
Thank you. Anyone would like to pick up any other questions?
Susanna, I can take the one on how to avoid re-traumatization of children when we design monitoring and evaluation tools for domestic violence prevention and assistance program. So the question about engaging children in co-designing processes. Thank you very much for this question. Needless to say, all of the examples I shared a bit earlier that we use to avoid re-traumatization, they apply for co-designing activities. I would like to reflect on a concrete example from the practice of TDH, from engaging children in consultative, collaborative processes when designing services, projects, policies, and initiatives. So this approach is called Child and Youth Advisory Boards, and I do believe that many of you have heard about this modality of child participation, and perhaps you are the ones who facilitate child participation processes. So the way we start this process is when children apply for participating in co-designing activities. Right from the beginning, we conduct what we call friendly discussions to learn each individual child a little bit better. So simple questions. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about yourselves? What are some of the things you care about? Would you like to tell me about some of the things that make you feel joyful? What are some of the knowledge, skills, talents that you would like to contribute to this process? And I think this question is really important because traumatic experiences by their nature are disempowering. They are taking the power away from the child. And it is meaningful, rights-based participation processes that are empowering. We are giving children a sense of control back. So moving from disempowerment to empowerment. And another question that might be explored during these friendly discussions is, for instance, what are some of the challenges, some of the difficulties that you might face during co-designing processes, and what are some things that we as facilitators, as adults, can do to support you? So before we bring children in a participatory space, we already know some individual needs and interests of the child, so we are more aware of what might some of the areas where support might be needed. And when I stop talking, I will drop in the chat this methodology on child and youth advisory boards, and it is available in English, in Romanian, Albanian, Greek, and Ukrainian languages. So we invite you to explore this resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Anastasia.
I would also like to reply to one of the questions because I think they are linked to also what I presented. It's by Alexis, and it says, how can we help children, adolescents to realize that they have suffered when most adults surrounding them are not even aware of their own traumas and aren't doing the work to heal? For example, I volunteer at a very small foundation for disadvantaged youth in a small town with very little resources, and I witness children going there continuously being re-traumatized because the administration of that place is really chaotic and ineffective and not open to this kind of information. As I was mentioning in the presentation, it's enough at the beginning to have one safe adult. In this case, you can be the safe adult of the children. Of course, you cannot help everyone, but if you can provide support to the children while interact with them, you have the activities. Of course, it's not necessary that you don't have to point out that they have a trauma, but maybe you can help them make sense of their emotions. As I was mentioning, the feeling wheel can help in trying to make sense, to validate their emotion, explore them a bit, and so that they can be aware of them. Of course, you can also say, for example, in order to validate, it makes sense that you feel sad or that you feel stressed, and you can do some grounding activities with them. Grounding exercises is just a micro intervention, but it can help them, to feel grounded until you can find maybe within the organization somebody that can be open to this practice, to being trauma informed. I'm sure that at least if you can provide, as a starting point, they can really have a strong reference, or have them find somebody, for example, a teacher or somebody close to them that they can talk to, and they can, feel safer, because it's all about first feeling safe and grounded. And yeah, that was my intervention. If Susanna wants to complete a bit more, but
Yeah, it's absolutely fine. Any more questions? Because we have quite few, and just for now, we might not be able to answer all of them due to timing. So we will answer as many as we can. I will go with one question, and in the meantime, perhaps you can pick up another question. The presenters, just look from the list. So we had the migration as a question. How does migration from one country to another? And we had the war trauma. So I'll focus on these two because I've had a lot of work around that done and experience in terms of migration. Migration is unsettling, and it is difficult for everyone. Not always traumatic, though. So it's really important to understand that children, depending on the developmental age, this affects them differently. And remember what we said earlier about the importance of relationships. So children from 0 to age 6, the stress is felt through disrupted routine, separation from familiar people, and parents' anxiety. So they show it through clinginess, sleep problems, regression, and tantrums. However, when there is supportive relationships, when there is safety within the relationships with their parents, if they are together, if there's no separation, the event will not become as traumatic. School-age children, we're talking 7 to 12, that middle age, they can struggle from the loss of friends because they have already created relationships in school, language barriers, learning a new language, not understanding. They can experience bullying, identity confusion. Migration becomes, and adolescence, it's also identity conflict and isolation, discrimination, and pressure to adapt quickly. Migration becomes traumatic when children feel unsafe, unsupported, and disconnected. But with stability and emotional support, predictable routines, and a caring adult, it can become a period of resilience, growth, and adaptation. And same goes for war trauma. When we talk about trauma, we need to understand intersectionality, and we need to understand different aspects and layers of trauma. No matter how difficult a situation is, when a child feels safe in the presence of their relationships, when they feel they can talk about their feelings without shame or guilt, and these feelings are discussed, are supported by adults, there's no blame, there's no shame, there's no guilt, it will not become traumatic. So it will be difficult, and we all go through difficulties in life. Most children go through difficult experiences, but when there is connection with adults, when there is support, they will not become traumatic. It's a very different process. Most traumatic experiences come from disconnect, which is also very important during the war, because parents are traumatized by the event. Parents are scared. They're scared for their well-being. They're scared for their children. They're scared about survival. Therefore, it impacts their parenting capacity. Okay. Anyone else has any questions? Wants to answer any questions? Because we're coming closer. Okay, so we only have one more time just for the one more answer, and I'm just checking. We did the war trauma. This is interesting because it goes, how can we promote a child's sense of competence without making them feel guilty for what happened to them? We will discuss a bit more about this in the next webinar, but for now, It's really important to focus on child's strengths, give them choices and the skills, not the traumatic event itself. It's really important to separate the child from the trauma. What happened to you is not your fault. You're not responsible for the actions of others. Highlighting strength, giving small choices, praising the effort, not the outcome. It's really important. Using empowering language, modeling, not judge, not non-blaming communication, such as instead of saying, why did you, we focus on what do you need to feel safe? What can we do for you? And you did mention some of these approaches earlier, both speakers. So I think we're coming to the end of the webinar, and if any answers are left, any questions are left unanswered, we try to answer all of them, but we might have missed some due to the volume and due to the timing. We also need to move on and ask you to do a poll. So if we can bring that on the screen. If we could ask you all to complete this poll. Okay. Are we completed with the poll? Yes. Thank you very much. I would like to invite each presenter to share one key takeaway. Just 1 minute, one sentence, two sentences regarding the webinar and the presentations and the learning from the trauma-informed care. So shall we start with the order of presenting? Ralitsa?
Yes, I'm very happy that we had so much people here listening and participating with their questions from different countries, different backgrounds. For me, this is maybe the most important part because trauma is something that we all have to deal with, and it's not a word to be used lightly, and we all share responsibility. And I'm very happy that we can gather and talk about it and think about it. And hopefully we carry this discussion into our work in the future. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you as well. Francesca?
Yes, so as I mentioned during the presentation, it's very important to create a safe space for the people you support. And to create a safe space, sometimes it can feel very hard to do because our emotion also interact with the emotion of the people we are interacting with. But trying to kind of first work on yourself and think about, what makes you feel emotionally safe as well, and regulate yourself before you also interact with other people, so you can also be grounded and really actually help them navigate their emotion as well. And this requires practice, but as I said, there are many ways to practice this, so I encourage you to do that and maybe revise the material after we post them. Thank you for being here and for staying till the end.
Thank you, Francesca. Anastasia?
Thank you. My final reflection will be following. Today, we really emphasized how important it is to be cognizant of different challenges and risks and vulnerabilities that children have. And with that, my final message would be that it is equally important to be cognizant of strength and resources and capacities to cope and resilience capacities each child equally possesses. And it is this strength and resources that we would like to elevate. And speaking about empowerment, it was this question about co-designing, about child participation is one of the most powerful tools to bring power back to children. Yeah, I thank you very much again for joining. It was a huge pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for your beautiful insights, beautiful presentations. I'm so happy I got to share this space with you and hear all you had to present about trauma. Maria, can I invite you in just to say something about presentation, the certificates, the process of gaining the certificates, and the next webinar?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you all for participating. Please note that to gain the certificates for participation on this webinar, please, for the countries, send an email to one of the addresses placed in the chat. I will just mention to you. For Romania, please to Francesca Nicora, for Kosovo, to Maria Vuxani, for Greece, Georgia Canaris, for Croatia, Antonella at Hrabri Telefon, for Bulgaria to Boris Lavrev or to David Kuryanov. Also, please note that this is the first webinar in the series of 3 webinars. The second webinar will be organized on the 2nd of December. I think that the registration for the second webinar is already open, so you're more than welcome for those that have not been registered yet so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria. Now, as we're coming to an end, on behalf of Terre des Hommes and all the partners across the Caring 2.0 consortium, I'd like to sincerely thank our speakers, Ralitsa, Francesca, and Anastasia, and all of you who joined us today for your presence, openness, and reflections. Today's webinar reminded us that trauma-informed care is not just a concept or a set of tools. It's a mindset and a way of being that helps us create spaces of safety, empathy, and trust in everything that we do. Thank you again for being part of today's discussion. And until next time, take care and stay connected and look after yourselves.